Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives and stories in the Texas outdoors. Today I sit down with a man who's known for many things, most notably the art he produces with the camera and his skills of coyote trapping. This is my conversation with Wyman Meinzer. Okay, cool. Well, with that being said, I'm ready to get into this. I got the legendary photographer of Texas, Mr. Wyman Meinzer, here today. And the way I like to start all of these is very, very simple. I like to start from the very, very beginning of your first memory in the outdoors and then kind of run me through you in your adolescent life when you get into photography, stuff like that. But just kind of give me the chronological progression of how Wyman becomes Wyman.
Okay. I was raised on a ranch. My dad was a foreman on a 27,000 acre ranch over here east of Benjamin, about 10 miles. And so raised, reared with my brother in just big, wide open country, which kind of molds a young boy just because of the freedom that you're allowed to have. So I started hunting very early in life, like 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And I just grew up just loving the outdoors. I collected bird eggs. I hunted and studied bird species, and so that was always, even though I cowboyed on the side to try to make money, hunting and wildlife was really big to me. When I was about 10 or 12 years old, I developed an interest in photography because I remember I walked up to my mom. And she was the photographer of the family. She had like a couple old Kodak box cameras, 120s. Mm-hmm. And I said, Mom, I'd like to take some pictures. And so she gave me a little Kodaflex 2, I think it is, 120, 12 shots, and black and white. And I carried it in my saddlebag with me and took pictures of horses and cattle and, dogs and things like that. But it wouldn't focus close, so I kind of lost interest in photography. That's when I was about probably 15. I kind of went, I don't want to take.
What do you mean wouldn't focus close?
Well, I like to shoot strong, and those cameras are pre-focused. And so if you got closer than 5 feet, all your subject matter was blurry.
Oh, okay.
So you lost your the good feel of the shot. And so I still remember I remember the day I photographed, I think it was a steel trap I'd had set, and I moved in real close on it. And when I got the picture back, it was all blurry, and I thought, this is no good. This is not going to be any fun. And so I just quit using it, Uh-huh. And then whenever I took off to Texas Tech in 1969, and even though I knew there wasn't going to be any work, I had a goal. I saw so many people without a goal once they went to college. They didn't know what they were going to study. I was going to study wildlife biology, come hell or high water. That was going to be my deal. I probably wasn't going to get a job in it, but that was going to be my degree. And so I never deviated. And so when I was about 14, I developed an interest in coyotes and became a predator hunter. And that's all I did. I hunted coyotes all the time.
Do you remember why the passion for coyotes started?
I used to dream about them when I was a little boy.
Really?
Yeah. I used to dream about coyotes. And then I'd lay awake at night. We lived about a mile from the Brazos River up on a hill. I remember laying in bed at night. Of course, we didn't have air conditioners back then in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, and have the window open and the wind would be blowing, and I would listen to the coyotes howl at night, and it was just something fascinating about it. And so I remember October the 17th, 1965, I shot my first coyote, and after that, it was like that's all I could think about. But then I set a goal. I wanted to become the most let's see I wanted to be an expert on coyote behavior, especially food habits. More probably, I set a goal to be the best in America. That's when I was 18 years old. And so I initiated a research project of my own for 1 year, I studied when I was going to Texas Tech.
This episode is made possible by our friends over at Gordy & Sons Outfitters, located in Houston, Texas, and employing a team of experienced outdoorsmen specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and wing shooting. Gordy & Sons is sure to prepare you for success in the outdoors. Next time you find yourself prepping for a weekend getaway or a bucket list trip, be sure to give them a shout.
I designated like 3 study areas by terrain, by vegetative matter, by the food sources. And then I would take scat samples, stomach samples, and then I would compare them in these areas. Mm-hmm. Well, I took all this data to one of my professors one day, and I said, thought you might be interested in something I've been doing. And he looked at it and he said, why did you do this? And I said, because I wanted to learn.
I want to be the best.
And he said, well, let's go show this to Dr. Darrell Eckert, who was my major professor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Dr. Eckert looked at me and he said, why did you do this? And I said, because I wanted to learn. He said, well, we're going to get you a grant and we're going to pay you to do it for another year.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got the grant, and for the next year, I got to hunt coyotes and got paid for it. Except the only bad thing about it was I had to eviscerate everything that I shot. Yeah. And that was smelly as all get out, and then collect 500 stool samples of coyotes. And but it was published in the Journal of Range Management. And then I gave a paper at the International Meeting for the Society of Range Management in 1974 in Tucson, Arizona. And it was selected as one of the best student papers given.
Wow. Before we got into this, you briefly mentioned the first coyote you ever killed. I would like to see if you can tell me the exact details of that story, maybe how you felt, stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. It's at 2:15. I've got it written down. I wrote it down.
Well, you're making my job easy over here, Wyman.
I got it written down.
Should have brought my questions.
It was at 2:15 in the afternoon. It was kind of an overcast day. It had been raining a little bit, and a Baptist preacher's son and I were out on a hill in what our pastor was called the North Patton. And I just got, my girlfriend had given me a call that her daddy had made, her father had made out of Osage orange. It was an open reed call. And no doubt I sounded horrible, but I sat my buddy behind me with a .22 Magnum, and I sat looking to the north with a 30-30 Marlin. I only had 2 rounds of ammunition because I'd used it all trying to sight it in. Had a 2.5 power Sears and Roebuck scope on it. It cost me $32. And I started calling, and all of a sudden I looked down and there were 2 coyotes, and they were running like hell away from me. Probably I scared them, calling. And I jumped up and shot at 247 yards, and I hit one of them and killed it.
Really?
And I remember screaming. I said, I got the SOB. And he said, oh, you didn't either, my friend Kermit Woolley. And I just took off running down there, and I piled rocks up on the spot, and they're still there today.
I was going to say, I was going to ask if they still are.
And I thought, I took a rangefinder out there a couple of years ago, and I thought, probably I exaggerated. I was 14 years old. I'm going to check and see if I was right. And it's 247 yards to the yard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is something I think is so interesting, is finding those moments where people tend to let the passion take over.
Yeah, that was my passion all through college. On weekends, I came in and worked, and I hunted.
Yeah,
all the time. And then whenever I graduated, I felt like college. I know this sounds funny, but I felt like college cheated me out of a lot of good hunting. And so, upon graduation, I graduated in May of '74, and so in the autumn of '74, I moved out to the Pitchfork Ranch and moved into a half dugout with no running water and no electricity. And I lived there for 3 winters, trapping coyotes.
Really?
For a living. Paid my college loan off, my pickup payments, took care of all that stuff, had a little extra spending money. I was single, didn't need a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so just had a wonderful, wonderful time.
That was where those pictures came from in that Yeti film that you showed me? Those ones?
Yep. That's it.
What was one of those days like? Like being able to trap so many and
Well, the trap line was they'd be like 50 miles long, and I'd go all day. I'd go a week without hardly seeing a person. I wouldn't even say a word all day long, if you can imagine that. In fact, after I come back home, it was actually difficult to carry on a conversation with people.
Really?
Because I never talked out there. All I did was just drove and hunted and walked.
Oh man, I can't imagine that. I bet not only that, but like kind of losing sight of like creature comforts as well.
Oh yeah, because like I say, I took like one bath a week in a number 2 wash tub. I would dip the water out of the well and put it in a water tub and put it on an old propane stove and had a fireplace, and I'd scoot it in front of the fireplace, and I'd take my once a week bath.
Were you developing images while you were there during the winters, or were you stocking them up and also waiting?
You mean photographic images?
Yes.
Yeah, I started really becoming interested in photography, and actually maybe become an editorial photographer in 1976.
Oh, I thought we had talked about how it was you kind of grew in conjunction with the passion of coyotes and stuff like that.
I did, but as far as going beyond just photographs, I wanted to become a professional photographer.
Gotcha.
And I started aspiring to do so in 1976. I still remember, it was 76. And I started buying pretty good equipment. Mm-hmm. Bought my first F1, Canon F1, motor drive, MF. I bought a 500 millimeter fluorite lens, f5.6, real hot rock lens.
F5.6. That's a hot rock. Wow.
That was a hot rock lens. Shooting Kodachrome 64. And so this is what's really weird. I took my camera with me every day on the trap line, and I didn't really understand composition, nor really how to really get. I wanted great light. I started early appreciating color, but I didn't really understand how to correctly expose all the time. So I just point the camera in and take an exposure, and then I'd shoot. Sometimes they'd be good, sometimes not so good. I remember one day I took a picture of a coyote that was in a trap, and it was such an emotional moment because that coyote was really, he fought. I mean, most of them wouldn't, but he would actually just, he actually, the expression on his face, I had to stop and think. I thought, wow, this animal, he's fixing to perish, and I'm going to sell his fur, but he's fighting me to the bitter end. And I took a picture of him. And in later years, that picture was selected by Texas Monthly as one of the greatest 100 pictures published in that magazine. And it was published in a book. Texas Monthly's Best 100 or something like that.
What message do you think that image portrayed?
Well, I know
why did it get picked? I know that
they bought the photograph for a story called Coyote Wars, and it was a photo that was the lead shot for that particular article.
That's interesting. It's funny, that story you told me, it's similar to one I heard of, like one of those very basic shark attack stories where like a surfer gets kind of bit, loses a limb. But this one specific, this guy, after he loses his limb, I believe he loses his right arm, he starts pursuing sharks relentlessly. Yeah. Killing as many as he can. And then finally he fights one like hammerhead that's about 16 foot. And it fought him for so long that he was like, man, like, this animal is trying so hard to fight for its life. Like, it made him rethink pretty much everything up until that point, and essentially changed him to kind of start advocating for the promulgation of the species, or just trying to be, hey, like, we can be conservation minded even though, so I thought that was interesting.
It does. All the years I've hunted coyotes for 60 years, and now I take photographs more so than I shoot them. But as I talked about earlier, I do collect some each winter just to keep notes going from year to next, so I can see patterns, behavioral patterns, or say patterns in the biology of coyotes. Say if they're gaining weight over the years, in which, as I'd mentioned earlier, they have. And so,
But we should definitely get into that a little bit, because I thought that the consensus behind it was very interesting. Also, talking about the mesquite berries, I believe is what they're called.
mesquite beans,
Mesquite beans, sorry.
pods,
Yes, so I think we should definitely go into some of that as well. And I'll preface that by saying, what are some of the not scientific discoveries, but genuine surprises that you have found through your constant recollection through the little blue book that you talk about?
You mean on coyotes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they'll eat anything. You wouldn't believe when I was conducting my research, the stomach analysis, what I would see. I mean, they'd eat anything, plastic, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
They're survivors. They're just amazing creatures. But other than that, I mean, it was just interesting to me. It was interesting. People think of the coyote as a carnivore. Well, they're not. They're an omnivore.
I did, as of maybe 20 minutes ago.
They're an omnivore. They'll if they have nothing else, they'll be a carnivore. They'll eat nothing but meat. But in May here in the rolling plains of Texas, they'll eat lokeberries. Once between the lokeberry and the mesquite pod production, they'll eat what we call 4 o'clock bugs. They cross the highways late in the afternoons, and coyotes just really consume a lot of those insects. And then once the mesquite pods come on and drop, that's all they'll eat essentially. It's like 100% for like up into August, until the cactus apples, we call them punchia apples. Once they come on, well, they'll just eat these cactus apples. And then in October, they'll start eating cedar berries. And as terrible as cedar berries taste, I mean, they're so bitter, coyotes love them. And that's what they'll eat all through the winter, unless the cedar berry crop doesn't make. And then they'll really go heavy on wild hogs, young wild pigs. They eat a lot of carrion, dead meat, dead cows, dead calves, and stuff like that. A lot of people believe that coyotes are really hard on livestock. Sheep, yes. Cattle, no. I mean, like I say, I was raised on a 27,000 acre ranch, and we really never had any problems with that. There are some ranches in some areas, like my son, he leases a ranch on the Wichita River, and for some reason, coyotes down there will bite the tails off of his calves. And I don't know what the deal is. If
like cellulose or fiber or something. I
don't understand, because they didn't on the Brazos River, which is just a few miles away, but on the Wichita, there was something about the coyotes down there. They like to bite the tails off of calves.
I wonder if it's some sort of like mineral deficiency in the soil that may be kind of hindering them, like, with electrolytes or something, like when they eat,
You got me. I don't know, but generally speaking, they're not hard on cattle. Sheep, yes. Sheep and goats, yes.
Okay. Well, one of the things I now wanted to get into a little bit was more your photography work. We've talked a little bit about coyotes, but for someone to be named the official state photographer of Texas, I think that in and of itself is an extremely difficult task, because it really wasn't done until you. Would you mind talking a little bit about the days or years preceding that moment, and maybe how it felt to get that award?
Okay, I was first published in 1979, I believe, in National Wildlife and Texas Parks and Wildlife almost simultaneously. Well, once I was published, it was like a drug. I had to be published. I mean, that's all I thought about. I want to be published more and more and more. And so I started going immediately to New York magazines, and I'd Field and Stream, Outdoor, Life, Sports, or Field. And so I was mostly a cover shooter, because I ended up shooting like 45 or 50 covers for the national magazines over the years. And in 1985, I was named one of 5 new breed of photographers in America by Sports Field magazine. Okay, and that was my first sort of accolade. Okay. That was because of my photography work. And then in 1987, I was chosen as an outstanding alum in the Department of Range and Wildlife at Texas Tech because of my magazine publishing. Because if, being in college, you'll understand that PhDs thrive on publishing and they appreciate people who publish.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a PhD and you're in an academic setting, if you don't publish, you perish.
Interesting.
That's an old saying. If you either publish or you perish.
Huh.
Well, they appreciated the fact that I was a graduate of Tech and that I published a lot, not scientific stuff. It was
But
just
still.
magazine covers, but millions of people saw it. And so I was designated a outstanding alum in 1987 in the department, which surprised me because I wasn't a great student at all.
Do you want to tell a story about that phone call?
Yeah, I received a call from a professor that I always really kind of spooked me when I was at Tech. He was kind of a pretty tough guy. He taught advanced statistics. And so I got this phone call one day, and it was actually my mother. I was down at her house. I was mowing or something. She said, "You got a call here from a professor at Tech." And I said, "Who?" And she told me the name, Dr. Wright. And I said, "Why would Dr. Wright call me?" So I walked in. I said, "Dr. Wright?" And he said, "Yes, this is Wyman." Yeah. He said, "Well, I just want to let you know that you've been named a outstanding alum in the department." And I said, "Henry, do you remember me?" Because I was not a good student. And he laughed and he said, "It's not what you did when you were at Tech. It's what you've accomplished since you've been out." And I said, "Okay, you might have the right guy."
It was funny the first time. It's still funny now.
I know. It's just like, why me? Why me? Because, I was not a great student.
Yeah.
If I was in a class that I liked, I excelled in it.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't like it, I just got through it.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of these guys who was a gung-ho student.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take a class in comparative vertebrate anatomy, which is a cull course for pre-med students,
Mm-hmm.
and over in zoology. An extremely difficult course, but I liked it,
Mm-hmm.
and I made a B in it. Didn't make an A, but I made a B, and that was something because it was such a difficult course. But if you couldn't make an A in that course or a B, and you were going to be a doctor, you got kicked out. You weren't going to go to med school. But I could take another course that was fairly easy. If I didn't like it, I'd get my C, and I was tickled.
Yeah.
I was kind of a student I was.
Did you ever take the course that was like comparing like trees and leaves and branches and stuff like that? It was like comparative anatomy, but it was like arborology. Like
No, I took, oh golly, I forgot. I took a lot of plant courses because I was on the Texas Tech plant team for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we won the Nationals in Washington, D.C. the first year.
Wait, what is a plant team?
You have like 50 or 100 plant or 80. I forgot the number. It's been so long that you've got to know the scientific name, the common name, and you've got to study these plants, and then they you take these tests at the very end, and you're selected. There's 3 guys on the team, and you represent the department. And each year they have it in a different state, different city. Mexico City, Washington, D.C., Boise, Idaho, Tucson, Arizona. I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to Boise, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Washington, D.C., we won the Nationals there. Boise, Idaho, we blew it and got 4th. And then I just got tired of studying plants. And then when in Tucson, when I was a senior, they asked me to give my coyote research paper there to the student conclave. Mm-hmm. And it was selected as one of the best papers given.
One of the questions that I have, I was going to go somewhere else with this, but where did the passion for knowledge come from for you anyways? Because you briefly mentioned that you knew without a shadow of a doubt you were going to go into the wildlife side of the industry no matter what. You knew this.
Yes.
But where did it start? Like you mentioned you spent all this time outside, but like was there a moment where you were like, this is what I want to do? Or it was like the switch was flipped?
Not really. It was just that I was so much of an outdoors person.
Gotcha.
I mean, anything dealing with the outdoors I loved.
And what about the obsession with history?
History, I really didn't get into history that much until 1985 or 86. And And there were two people came by to see me. I didn't know them, but they asked me if I knew of any old graves that were in this area, old graves dating back to the 19th century. And I said, yeah, I know where there's a buffalo hunter's grave. And it's out here about 2 miles out of town.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Seal Sweeney. It has inscribed on the stone, Seal Sweeney shot himself accidentally January 1878.
Wow.
And so I took them out there, and they were really enthralled with it, and they took some photographs and everything. So when they left a book with me called Border and the Buffalo, written by John Cook. And it was a buffalo hunter, and he wrote his life as a buffalo hunter in this area right here.
Really?
And it blew my mind. Absolutely blew me away. That's all I could think about. And I started, and of course, I'd always been interested in archaeology and paleontology.
Mm-hmm.
I actually toyed with the idea of being a paleontologist.
Really?
Yeah, because I dig up buffalo skulls and elephant tusk, mammoth tusk, dating back 10, 12,000 years.
You still have one of those buffalo skulls?
Yeah, I got two of them.
I'll buy one off you.
I still have two. I better not. And so actually my sons,
No, I'm kidding.
Will get both of it. Both my sons will get them.
I can imagine. That's history right there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And so I started studying everything I get a hold of, reading about buffalo hunters.
Mm-hmm.
J. Wright Moore, John Cook, Big Jim White, they all hunted in this area, and they talk about hunting buffalo and wolves in Knox County, Haskell County, Stonewall County. John Cook at first was a skinner in 1875, and they came from Fort Elliott in the Panhandle. He actually came from Kansas, and he came down with some surveyors and then got lost in the Texas Panhandle and got involved, came up on a buffalo hunter's camp and got with those guys, and they went to Fort Elliott, and he tied up with a guy, let's see, I forgot his name. Both of them fought for the Union in the Civil War.
Wow.
And one of them was in that terrible prisoner camp that the Confederacy had. He survived that camp.
Do you have more information about that?
Man, oh gosh.
Like I've never heard of
it was
infamous camp.
I had the name just then and it slipped me. I can't think of it right now. Maybe here in a minute.
Okay.
But anyway, because of that, he had a drinking problem. John Cook mentioned this guy had a drinking problem. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they left Fort Elliott in the Panhandle, and it took them 10 days to get to Stonewall County, which is just southwest of us here.
Mm-hmm.
And in, let's see, the first day, they shot over 200 buffalo. The first day.
Jesus.
And like in 3 months, they had killed 3,000 something buffalo. And he could skin like 30 or 40 buffalo a day, John Cook could.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time I skinned 4 buffalo from lunch till sundown, and I thought I was going to die. And I thought, how those guys do it? And then I remembered I'm about 66 and they were like 20. So there's a difference. Wow. So anyway, I just became enthralled with it. And there's actually a buffalo hunters town over here in Stonewall County called Wrath City.
Mm-hmm.
It was established, I believe, in 1875, and it was deserted. The guy moved it was actually just a little camp. It had a bar. It had 2 hotels.
Quote unquote.
I'm sure they were just tents. And then they had a hide buying location. They had a powder magazine. It's now actually a wheat field.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone out there with a metal detector and found cartridges and bullets from buffalo hunters and broken spurs and all kinds of stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And John Cook wrote a lot about Wrath City, being there in Wrath City, and what a wild place it was. There was no law.
I bet.
There was just the law of human decency.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about one day there was a guy walked in. The barber, the barkeep was a barber, and he was cutting the hair of a young Swede buffalo hunter. and this guy walks in and says something to the Swede, and the Swede smarts off, and the buffalo hunter pulls a pistol and breaks the Swede's shoulder with it, shoots him, and then the barkeep steps around and said, "Why did you do that?" And then they backed out into the street shooting at each other, and the guy who started it falls dead. And John Cook was loading buffalo tongues in a wagon, and one of the bullets hits the bag that he was holding. And so the barkeep and another couple of guys rode their horses all the way to Fort Griffin and told the authorities there what happened. So it was deemed as self-defense. And so they rode back to Rat City, and this guy's grave is still there.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
There's 2 graves near this little town site, and there's a historical marker I helped put up there. And these 2 guys are buried. One of them's name is, let's see, oh, golly. It's been years since I've been there, years and years. Oh, my word. He was killed by Indians. And then there's the fellow that got shot in the gunfight.
Do you know which tribe they killed him?
Yeah, the Comanches.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And all this passion came from just you receiving and reading that book?
That one book.
Really?
And I went and I actually wrote a magazine article in the late 80s about the buffalo slaughter. And I interviewed the granddaughter of one of the greatest buffalo hunters that came out of Kansas and ended up in Texas and established a ranch near Snyder. And his name was J. Wright Moore. And I interviewed his granddaughter, and she was like in her 60s. And she told me J. Wright Moore died, I believe, in 1940. And she took me to where J. Wright's camp was and showed me the well that he dug. And then she took me to the exact spot where J. Wright in 1876 killed the only white buffalo that was ever killed in Texas. In October of 1876, he killed a white buffalo. And in her home, that hide is on the wall of that white buffalo. And you can see the bullet hole through her shoulder.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
And I held his rifle in my hands.
Yeah.
A 50-90 Sharps. It weighed 14 pounds.
Did you feel like any sort of like deeper meaning holding that gun? Any sort of connection to like history or something like that?
In a way. He had 2 rifles. He killed 14,000 buffalo with one rifle.
Jesus.
And he killed 8,000 buffalo with his 50-90. He shot a 44-90 and a 50-90.
Wow. One of the people who I've met recently who shares a deep affinity for similar culture is Calvin Carter. Mm-hmm. He's an artist out of Houston area, a little bit more to the east, I believe. And his whole thing was he did a lot of fish and does a lot of commissions for stuff like that. But he started getting into Native American art. And he was one of the first people that was putting in the work for doing the research. Mm-hmm. So he was telling me a story about like how one of like I forgot what tribe it is, but one of the natives actually reached out to him over Facebook and was like, call me immediately. And so he did. And this guy was telling me like, how did you know that sometimes we would use umbrellas and stuff, and people would never assume that Native Americans use umbrellas, but they would get it from when they were trading back in the day and stuff like that. So it was very cool to see so much passion for illustrating what was. And again, trying to respect it. One of the questions I have for you, and we haven't gone there yet, but do you think that one of the reasons why you have so much pride, but also respect for the people who came before you was because you spent so much time working alongside people who were born in the 80s, or sorry, 80s, in the 1800s? Yes, I
think so. The people that I worked with when I was a young boy that were born in the 1880s and 1890s, they were a very gentle people, very hardworking people, but also people that you wouldn't fool with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that.
They wouldn't put up with the crap you see today.
That's interesting.
But they would give you the shirt off their back if you needed it.
That sounds like what people tend to expect Texas to be like regardless. It's always like you keep to your own, I keep to mine, and we keep a mutual respectful distance. And you think you see less and less of that, the more congested an area can get.
Yes.
But I totally, like, that is like, wow, like that sounds like something to be proud of in a way, because that's
I wouldn't trade for the stories they would tell me. I remember sitting at the feet. See, my dad was a deacon in a Baptist church. I mean, I was raised as a real church going guy. I really don't go much anymore. I'm a Christian man, but I just don't go to church. I pray every night for America. I pray for you and me. I pray for all Americans that we do well and we come out of the rut we're in, as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, I'm right there with you.
But I remember oh my goodness, where was I going with this? I was sitting. I remember I missed church one day. And that's something I never did because my daddy made sure I went to church. But I missed church that Sunday, sitting at the feet of an old gentleman in his rocking chair who was born in 1884. And he told me stories about his boyhood and about growing up and the wildlife and stuff that was here during those years. And the next week he died.
Really?
And I would not take for those moments spent with that old gentleman.
Would you mind sharing one of those stories that you heard?
Most of the questions I would ask him were about the wolves.
Interesting.
See, I'm a carnivore guy.
Interesting.
I love carnivores and wolves, the extinct buffalo wolves that were here at the time. And the Canis lupus ludovicianus was a big buffalo wolf that was famous through this area. You had like three major wolves in Texas. You had Canis lupus ludovicianus, Canis lupus monstrabilis, which was like the Concho River country. Then you had Canis lupus texensis, which was in West Texas. They were a smaller wolf. But the buffalo wolves were the biggest wolves because they preyed on buffalo. They through the eons, they were buffalo killers. And so I would ask him about that. And he said, well, we would see their tracks sometimes. But he said, when I was a boy, when I got old enough, you'd maybe hear them, but you never saw them. They were just so elusive all the time. And one old gentleman, Wade House, born in 1899, he said, I never saw him, but he said, my father, he called him Papa. Papa told me that when he came into this country, they would move Mexican steers out about 15 miles out of Benjamin, and they would be taking them down to the river. And he said those wolves would come out of the brush and just cut the tendon of a steer and knock him down. And then they'd see the cowboys and they'd run, and we'd have to shoot the steers because they were ruined. They couldn't go. Yeah. But they were going to kill and eat them, but the cowboys scared them off. But he said his daddy told him about the wolves that they saw. And I have a friend, two friends, that found wolf traps on their ranches see, I'm a trap collector also. Not only did I trap, I collect traps. And I'm very familiar with the wolf trap that was built specifically in New York for Texas ranchers. And they introduced it in like 1895 or 1896. And it's a Oneida, it's a Kenwood Newhouse 4.5, and it's got wolf on the pan. And I've got two friends who are ranchers who found those traps on their ranches. And did you know that you can still set them and they would catch a wolf today? Really? Yes. They were lost by the trapper. But what fascinates me is that whenever you pick up that trap, the last time it was set to catch the now extinct Texas buffalo wolf.
That is so cool to think about too. Not to mention just the fact that the ingenuity in it of itself was so rigid and withheld, and withstood like the effects of time. Like that's unbelievable.
It is. It's a wonder. I don't know why they're not rusted, but they were not even hardly rusty. But they were the traps. They from 1895 or 1896 to 1911, there was the Kenwood 4.5 Newhouse wolf trap. It had Kenwood, New York. From 1911 to 1925, it had Oneida Community. They took off Kenwood, and this was a Kenwood trap. So both these traps were made sometime between 1895 and 1911.
Wow. That is unbelievable to think about. If one of the funny things is, like, you mentioned that, like, even back then, like, they knew that the buffalo wolf was a thing, but it was hard for them to figure it out, to see them, because they were, like, smarter or elusive or what have you. But it's what I find interesting is how a lot of these like coyotes and wolves tend to be so not specific, but they tend to be so adaptable.
They are. The wolves were not so adaptable.
Well, I'm speaking about my own. I'm sorry.
The wolves were species specific. As far as prey, they had to have big game. They couldn't live on jackrabbits, so they killed deer and they killed buffalo. And whenever they exterminated the buffalo by 1879, the next thing in line was cattle, and they made inroads on cattle. And so the Texas cattlemen waged war. There was a literal wolf war. And they call it there's a book written. It's a small book, very interesting. I think it's called The North American Wolf or something like that. I have it, and some of that book is referred to as the Wolf War, and it was what the United States government declared war on the wolves in the United States of America and exterminated them. Except for your far north in Wisconsin, Minnesota, they exterminated the wolves in the United States of America. By the 1950s, they were gone.
You think that was a mistake overall?
Well, I think it's sad.
It is sad, but, like,
I
do you think
it's
it
very
could have
sad.
been? You think it could have been avoided, like the extinction of the species?
I think probably so, but it was just the mindset of the time. Whereas in respect to the coyote, they're so adaptable. Like we were talking about earlier, they're omnivores. They can go meat, they can go vegetative, they can go either one. Doesn't matter to them. Whatever's available, they'll take it. They will take a dog, small dog. They'll take a cat. They'll eat cats like, popcorn. Chickens, but generally they eat vegetative matter in the summertime, all the way up until to the heart of winter, which is January through, up until April or so. And during that period of time, they're specifically almost exclusively carnivores.
Yeah.
Or they carrion.
One of the things now that we were talking about, or you were mentioning, which in regards to trapping, that kind of fueled my interest in this question, or when you were, sorry, the question being, what exactly constitutes trapping nowadays versus what it was like when you were getting into it?
There's not a lot of steel trapping going on. It's more, well, first off, about the only people that trap anymore are your actual government employees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Whenever I started, the fur market was big. And so you could actually make a living skinning coyotes and selling them. I'd send them off to New Mexico, or I'd send them to Utah. And I would make my money there by just skinning them. And then the ranch, the ranch that I lived on, the Pitchfork, they furnished me with a place to live and hundreds of thousands of acres to trap on. At one time, I had like 300,000 acres, and there wasn't anyone else trapping. I never heard a gunshot, never saw another person except for cowboys, and that's it.
Wow.
And it was a great life, but I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
It was a very lonesome life. But I was a young guy. I was in my 20s, early 20s, and you can stand it. And now, I'm 74 years old, and I'm used to being around people. And I still go to that cabin today. That ranch the owners told me that they said that if you are willing to take care of that little half dugout, we will never let another person live there again. And so I go 2 or 3 times a year. I go down, I take a 6-pack of beer, I'll take some summer sausage,
Uh-huh.
and I'll go down there and I'll take a weed eater and a lawnmower and I'll mow weeds. There's not any grass. It's all weeds. I'll clean the house out. I'll wash the floor. I'll paint, and I'll nail boards that are loose, and I'll sit and drink a beer, take my 22 and shoot rocks, and then I'll go home.
Wow. Like one of the questions I still want to ask for some reason, what were some of the, like, I guess, like, what were some of the lessons that you learned in the early days of trapping?
Well, of course, when you're trapping, like, for a living, when you're actually hunting and trapping
For a living, or also just like recreation, like what you were learning. You know what I mean?
That's life. That's, you live and breathe it. You go to bed at night thinking about it. How am I going to set a trap a certain way to catch this particular animal on this trail? Or, for instance, is this a bobcat run? I'm going to make more money if I catch bobcats. They're worth 3 times what a coyote was worth. So I would just sit and think, where can I catch more of these animals? You know, and so you got up in the morning thinking about it. You went to bed at night thinking about it. You shot. I would carry 5,000 rounds of 22 ammunition every winter down there, and I would carry 100 rounds of high-powered rifle, and I would practice shooting all the time, constantly. If I wasn't skinning or setting traps, I was practicing shooting all the time. It was life for 4 months out of every winter. I lived and breathed it.
So you had to basically commit to it. You could not half-ass it in any which way.
No. I had my college loan to pay off. I had pickup payments to make, grocery bills. I mean, I had to make a living at it. People today, really, it's hard to convey to people what it's like. Every moment of every day, that's all you think about.
Yeah.
Because it represented, I mean, it fed you. If you didn't produce, you didn't eat. You didn't make your college loan payment. You didn't make your pickup payment. And so you had to produce. My goal was 27 animal units. An animal unit was a coyote.
Uh-huh.
And I figured that if I could average 27 animal units a week, I could make my pickup payment, my college loan payment, groceries, and have some beer money.
Beer money is important.
And I averaged it every week.
Wow. Just out of sheer curiosity, how much was the college loan?
Oh, it wasn't but like $1,500, but I could go to Tech. It cost me $1,500 a year to go to Tech. Now it's like $15,000.
That's a lot more. That's definitely
$20,000. Yeah.
Wow.
But that was big money for me back then.
I can imagine. No, yeah. I mean,
big money.
Yeah. That's just so interesting to think about. Another thing that I didn't know about you, and we'll get into it in a minute, but I want to preface it with writing, but was the fact that you also have you have a pilot's license and you are a pilot as well. Before I do get into that, I would like to touch up a little bit on the writing, because like I said, when I first found out who you were, it was more so, man, he takes great pictures. And it took me a couple days, a couple of your posts to finally like read in one of the stuff that you were writing. And it genuinely was impressive, the amount of passion that you put into a lot of these writings. Funny enough, when I told you I thought you were a great writer, you told me the story about how you decided to become one. So I would like for you to kind of mention that and, allude to a couple of stuff that you've written, things that you may or may not be proud of, et cetera.
Well, actually, when I was about, a freshman in high school, I would write these little fictional stories. And they became so popular with the other students, they would come by and they'd say, "Oh, don't get me killed in the next story that you write." And I say, "Well, I'll think about it," And so I kind of used it almost as a little bit of leverage, And so I actually still have those stories. They're handwritten. One of them's 30 pages long. And I should have been focusing more on math and stuff than doing these little fictional stories.
Not clearly. You're doing pretty well.
And so, of course, I had to have 3 semesters of college English, and one of them was technical writing. Well, the first one, of course, was your basic English, and I just kind of barely got by on that and got a C in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, your next one's going to be literature, and I didn't really like that very much. But technical writing, I like technical writing, and I made a good
Mm-hmm.
B in that course. And so I kind of felt like I could write a little bit. And then in 1981, I believe it was, Texas Parks and Wildlife editor, David Baxter. I just thank the world and all of David and the photo editor, Bill Reeves. Those guys gave me a start. David Baxter asked me, he said, would you write an article on coyotes? And I said, well, David, I've never written a magazine article before. And he said, well, give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, about 1,500 words. And when I called him about it, he said, this is a good article. He said, this is as good or better than a lot of guys that do this for a living. And at that point, I realized that maybe I can write. And I started writing, and eventually, golly, I wrote, I don't know how many articles. I've got, dozens and dozens and dozens of articles for Parks and Wildlife, Texas Highways. I wrote a big 3,000 word piece for Korea Geo. I can't remember all the magazines.
I mean, I wasn't expecting to remember all of them. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But I can only I feel like it's a vindicating feeling to try something new, to go out on a limb and see that your passion supersedes the difficulty of the task in order to let you seem or come off as proficient.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I sometimes I really surprise myself that I would actually do that. That I actually went to that much trouble. I mean, I worked hard at it. And you have to, because once I developed a passion for photography, I can tell you, even in the 80s, whenever magazines paid really well. In the 80s, the big three, we called them, Sports and Field, Outdoor Life, and Field and Stream. Those guys paid good money. Field and Stream, if you published just a little
blurb or something,
little blurb picture,
yeah.
$500.
Wow,
that was in the 80s.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, you get
it's like $1,200, $1,500
$1,800 for a cover, and that was good. And then of course once they merged, well then it just went to hell in a handbasket, and I quit.
Yeah,
I just quit shooting for them anymore. I wouldn't do it. Refused to.
Yeah, I bet. Wow.
And then I kept shooting for Highways. I had I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of photographs, 45 covers for Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine, a couple of dozen covers and stories for Texas Highways.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept writing for those guys up until, probably 2000 or so, and then I just went exclusively to books.
Gotcha. Well, now we'll get there here in a minute. One of the things I want to ask if I forget is you briefly mentioned two names who actually helped you get your start in writing, essentially, who gave you that chance to become who you were as a writer. Who were some peers in the photography space, or in, I wouldn't say the trapping space because you were there so young and a lot of it was as you grew up and learned, but in the photography space or just in that outdoor area in general, who were people maybe helped you, advised you, or you looked up to?
Well, living here in Benjamin, you could get no advice.
Yeah, we're pretty far away from society right now.
The guys that fascinated me, there was one called Ernest Haas. He was a German photographer in New York. And his work of the Southwest was fascinating to me. I loved his color. He used like Kodachrome 12 way back there. And I still remember one shot that blew me away was an aerial shot of that those big cathedral type bluffs in the Four Corner area.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely spectacular. And I thought that's the kind of color I want to go after. Was the shots of Ernest Haas, his type of color, and his name really resonates with me. Of course, I remember Margaret Bork-White, who did a lot of the stuff in the Depression when they sent the photographers out to document the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
I liked her black and white. I actually studied black and white for a while.
What do you mean studied black and white?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean studied black and white? Like contrast or composition?
I actually had a dark room. I purchased a cold light head. I did a black and white book, Contemporary Ranches of Texas.
Really?
Yes, all black and white.
Wow.
And but once I got into the magazines heavily, I realized that black and white wasn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
They wanted color, and so it was Kodachrome.
Yeah.
That's all I shot was Kodachrome until Velvia came out. Kodachrome 64 and 25.
Kodachrome 64 and 25.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me into my next discussion of books. One of the interesting things that you mentioned that you actually photographed for your first book for the better part of 15 seasons.
The Roadrunner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That I started photographing Roadrunners in, I believe, 1977, maybe. And that was the first shot published in National Wildlife Magazine in 78 or 79.
Like their first issue or your first print?
My first published photograph.
Gotcha.
And it was of a roadrunner holding a collared lizard he'd killed in his beak, taking it to the babies at the nest. Shot it 1/25th of a second at 2/50th of a second at f2.8 with a 200 millimeter Canon lens with a Canon f1. And I was laying on my stomach and he trotted by me and it stopped and I got that fantastic light at the very last light of day. To this day, I can look at that photograph and I'm going, damn, that's good light. That's great color.
Wow. One of the things you mentioned is that you had to essentially build a relationship with some of these birds that you were shooting.
Yes.
Because of how hard it was to actually get the shots.
Yes. It's and you would go through several wild birds till you found a roadrunner that would accept your presence. And the way I would do it is if I could tell, you could tell if one would be acceptable. If you could go up to the nest and they kept sitting there and wouldn't fly away, they probably would accept you after a period of time. And so what I would do, I would catch lizards, or I would get take a BB gun and I'd kill grasshoppers, and I'd pile them on the edge of the nest. And when they would see me coming, finally after a few days, they would go, "He's got food."
Yeah.
And they would actually come out of the nest to meet me, and I knew I had them then. And they would actually allow me to go hunting with them. And I could photograph them hunting and killing lizards and snakes, and it was just amazing. In fact, I had learned that National Geographic was going to do a Roadrunner story, so I sent them a selection of photographs. And this was in the early 80s, and they wrote back and they said, "These are amazing photographs. The color has already gone to being processed, but we want to use these images in a book that we're doing." And so they published some of them in one of their National Geographic books.
And that one came out before Roadrunners?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you mentioned, I would like for you to go through the inspiration behind putting Roadrunners together.
Well, I'd graduated with a guy named Larry Butler, and he and I both, in fact, that's the only photograph I have of myself in my graduating gown. And Larry's standing beside me by the Ag building. That's the only picture. It was Larry Butler and I. And so Larry had gone on and got his PhD, and he was in Pecos, Texas, and working for the USDA, or the then they called the SCS. And so we were talking on the phone one day, and he said, "Well, what have you been up to?" And I said, "Well, I've been taking hundreds and thousands of pictures of roadrunners." He said, "You ought to do a book." And I started thinking about it. Well, maybe I should. And so I approached Texas Tech Press, and they said, "Well, we need to do some research and see if there's been anything published similar to this. If so, we won't do it." Well, then they came back and they said, "Hey, no one has ever done a book on roadrunners. We will do it." And so they published the book, and it was a roaring success. Before it even hit the U.S. shores from being printed, it had already sold out, because Smithsonian did a big 10-page spread on it, Smithsonian Magazine, Natural History, Texas Parks and Wildlife, numerous magazines. And then it went overseas. Dostier in Germany, Hortsu in Germany, Wildlands in France. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Aroni in Italy. I think that they're kind of, it's Italy's form of National Geographic. It looks just like National Geographic.
Really?
Same format, same color, everything. And they did a big spread on it. So it was published all over the world. And so the Roadrunner book was a roaring success. In fact, in my research, I was the first guy to ever determine that some roadrunners will actually hatch 3 clutches of young in one nesting season. It had never been documented before. And one so-called expert stated that, well, we think that roadrunners will raise 2 clutches. I actually documented 3 clutches from 2 different birds, from 2 different pairs. And then because of that, the Encyclopedia of the Great Plains was being published by Nebraska Press, and they asked me to write a chapter on roadrunners.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think any of those three count, whatever, you blinked on me for a second, was anecdotal to the specific situation of those roadrunners, or do you think that it was just one of those things where it's like, hey, this happens, we need to rethink how we look at it?
They had a long enough growing season. They started early.
Okay.
Their first clutch came out early or mid-April. Their second clutch, they'll actually leave the nest in 21 days. And so then they raised another clutch, and then their next clutch, their last clutch, was actually up in early fall, and it was getting chilly. We're having rains. And I still remember finding one of the young ones where he'd left the nest and then died at the foot of the tree. I photographed its body lying there, and so they just barely got in for 3 clutches.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if they don't actually mate for time, but more so than just like season, if you will, like certain temperatures.
I think they mate for life.
Climate dependent.
They mate for life.
Huh.
Yeah.
No, I guess I meant like within the year, you know.
Oh yeah, they stay together. The male and female, they alternate bringing food to the nest all through the day.
Interesting.
Actually, one day I thought I'm going to devote like 3 hours to counting how many times the male and female will bring food, who brings the most. And it was almost 50-50.
Wow. What other books or projects are you most proud of?
Well, I've done 30 books.
So there's a lot of material that I go over.
That's a lot. And I can't even remember some of them. There was a coyote. That's another, I consider a really great book. It was a very difficult book to write. I mean, to write and photograph, not so much to write because I lived and breathed coyote lore and their biology, but
it was difficult to concentrate.
It was difficult to photograph because they're such wild creatures.
Gotcha.
I mean, you're not going to befriend a coyote. They're just not going to. They're not going to handle it. And so that took a lot of work, a lot of cold work, wintertime work, sitting in a pit blind where you dug a pit and you covered it with mesquite stumps and cow chips, and you'd crawl in it before daylight, and you'd lay there in the cold. It'd be blowing snow and sleet, and you'd have a dead cow, say 30 yards away, and there'd be coyotes down there eating on it, and you'd photograph them fighting and interacting and stuff. And so that was a lot of work. And then there was the third book I did was Playas of the Great, Playas. I think it was just Playas. And I actually did the photography, and Jim Steyert was the author. And then I did 2 major books with Andrew Sansom, who was the executive director of Texas Parks and Wildlife. And one of them was Texas Lost, and one of them was Texas Past. And I was summoned to Austin. I still remember. I didn't know Andy. And he was in the legislature where they went to gain funds to continue Parks and Wildlife and pay their bills. And so I was summoned to talk to him. So I caught a flight from Lubbock and was picked up at the airport in Austin, by a game warden. He was parked right in the middle of the street, blocking traffic because he was in an official vehicle. Everybody stopped. And I walked out and I went, wow, he's got everybody lined up behind him. And I must be pretty important here. And anyway, I jumped in and he took me to the state capitol, sent a person in, and Andy came out and sat down. And he said, this is what I want. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Can you do it? It's got to be done. This was like in May, and it had to be done by July. And I said, yes, sir, I can do it. He said, how much will it cost? And I told him what I'd charge. And he looked up at his assistant. He said, see that he gets what he needs. And he turned and walked off. And then since then, he and I became lifelong friends.
Wow.
And then right after that was published. In fact, I can't remember if it was that book or the next one won an award. I believe it was that one. Won an award in Salt Lake City. I have it in there in the office. It was the National Literary Award. And so Andy and I flew to Salt Lake City and accepted that award. Yeah.
Wow. And the last one you put out, I think, was the one that I saw that you were really big fan of, which was Predator Calls.
Yeah. It's The Art of Predator Calling. Yeah, and it's I actually planned on starting that book when I was a freshman at Tech, and I wrote 10 pages. I wrote 10 pages, and I read that, and I went, wait a minute. I started studying coyotes and hunting coyotes when I was 14, and I'm now 19, and I'm going, I need more experience. And so in 2022 or 2021, I published that book. So I figured I needed about 58 years of experience.
You figured? You did the rough calculations.
Yeah.
Would you consider that project to be your magnum opus as a photographer?
That's the last book I'm going to do. I'm tired.
Yeah, you told me.
And it's 20,000 words. I think, well, in fact, Dr. Neil Wilkins, who is the executive director of the East Foundation, and he's a statistician as well as a wildlife biologist, and I asked him if he would do the statistical analysis of my data and write the preface to the book. And he told me later, he said, there has never been work done on this subject ever before. This is the most in-depth work on this subject I've ever seen in my life. It's never been done before. This is a first. And so I'm very, very proud of that book, and I feel like it's a good one to say I've done enough.
Absolutely. I don't think you can disagree with that at all. I can only imagine. I mean, like, knowing that I felt like mine was rushed, but mine was, and this might sound silly, but I wanted to get it out as fast as possible because there were people who were instrumental in my life that I wanted to see the book before, they may have passed. So that's one of the reasons why I rushed it, because even I felt like it was a smidge rushed. And so for you to have the foresight and the wherewithal to just sit there for 58 calculated years.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. In the Roadrunner book, I worked like 15 years on that material in the photography.
Yeah.
Before it was published.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine. What inspired you to want to get an airplane license?
There was a group of people over at Knox City, which is 11 miles away, and they were taking ground school. And I thought, I think I'll go over there and just sit through one. And I came out of there and I'm going to get my pilot's license. And I did not stop. I started, I think, in May, and I got my license I believe it was in October of 77. Started in May of 77, got my license in October.
And you've been flying every single month?
I flew until 1990, and I had an engine failure in a plane. I was looking for cattle, and I had a crash landing, flipped the plane upside down.
How was that?
But I walked out. It was one of those moments. It's one of those moments that you hear some people speak of whenever you stare death in the potential of death in the face. Okay, I'm 150 feet AGL above ground level, and all of a sudden the engine dies. It doesn't cough, it dies. the prop stops in front of you. And so I'm going, what am I going to do? And then you realize, wait a minute, I got to get the nose down. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Because I'm climbing. I've already given up to finding any more cattle. And so I'm climbing. I've got the stick back and I'm ascending. And all of a sudden the prop stops and I'm losing airspeed. I mean, by the millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing they teach you in flying is that airspeed is life. Airspeed and altitude. If you got airspeed and altitude, you got a chance to live. If you have a problem. So I instantly pushed the nose over and I thought, where am I going to land? Where am I going to land? To my left was where I wanted to land, but I could tell by my rate of descent, I was going to take out a barbed wire fence. And I did not want to get wrapped up in barbed wire fence because I had no door on the plane. Mm-hmm. And so I looked straight ahead of me and there was a wall of mesquites and I thought, I don't need a mesquite spear through me. And so the best scenario was the worst scenario. A tailwind landing on a hillside with gigantic clods that had been broken by what they call a big ox plow. And so I knew I needed to hit the hillside straight on. I didn't want to hit it at an angle. And I was so low that I had to do a very steep bank, almost a 90-degree bank, in order to pull out. But I had to get my airspeed up or I'd stall out. I'd lose my lift and my inside wing and I'd just spin in. Mm-hmm. And so I nosed it over and got my airspeed up and I banked it over. And just as I leveled out, I was probably 10 feet off the ground. And then I pulled the stick back and got the nose as high as I could. And my last thought was, this is not going to be pretty. This is going to be bad. And all I remember was a loud bang. And then I was hanging upside down in the cockpit. Really? Looking the opposite direction.
Were you injured?
No, I was just hanging there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I thought, wow, I looked around and then I heard gas spew and I thought, I got to get out of here. I'm going to burn up. And so I grabbed my shoulder harness and I clicked it, fell out on the roof and then rolled out on the wing and took off running. And I turned around and I went, well, hell. And then I just started walking and hitchhiked home.
Get another one.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a story that I had when I first had my first Maverick. I had left the house relatively late. It was like 3 p.m. in the middle of summer. And I had gone out to a place where I'd learned how to wade for these redfish. And at the time I was going through some stuff with some girl issues. So I just wanted to clear my head, essentially what I was going. Went out there. I wasn't really paying attention to the tides, get out to the spot where I wanted to be, go out fishing for 2 hours, and I walked out for about 3 miles. And then I turn around, or 2 miles, give or take, and I look at my watch, and the watch says that it's about an hour till sundown, and I'm still about 45, 50 minutes from my boat. And so I start walking back, and as I'm walking back, I realize the sun's coming down a little bit faster than it should. So I'm starting to get a little worried because I also don't have any lights on it. I just got in it. I get to the boat, and it's about 30 minutes till complete sundown. And so where I was essentially was so far out on the east that it's really easy to get lost, especially if you don't see the horizon. And so what ends up happening is I looked out in the distance and I picked out one of the cell towers that kept blinking and blinking and blinking. And so I just pointed the nose towards it and started walking and walking and walking. And I walked for what seemed first 30 minutes, and the water stayed about 6 inches. So for 30 minutes, I walked straight, nothing. Try to spin up, nothing. Sun goes down. Now I have no light. All I got is that red light in front of me. Keep on walking. I have a vivid memory of pushing from the polling tower, from the transom of the boat, and just seeing how the light from the front of the boat was red and blue and kind of reflecting off the waves, and I could see the man this in every other scenario is such a peaceful moment, but in my head all I wanted to do was get home, right? Yeah. And so it was like this weird dichotomy. I love it, but it's right now I don't want to be here, you know?
Yeah.
And so I could keep pushing, and about around 10 p.m. so it's about 2 hours of walking. I finally get in deep enough water. And mind you, I was doing some very dumb things beforehand just to get the boat on plane. I remember one time I started the motor up, I spun it up, and I actually had tied a dock rope to the front of the boat and I was like essentially like using it to hold myself up as the boat was spinning on the front of the boat, like super dangerous things, not working, zero, not working. So anyways, finally I get finally to the point where I can get out. I get out and I spin up, I take off, and I'm like looking around, everything seems kind of good, and then the GPS dies.
Wow.
No, I don't know what else to do. So like, but like I keep going in the same direction. Like I know I have about enough time to kind of figure it out. So I pull out my phones. I put my phone on Google Earth, and by right around the time that I'm looking at my phone and I'm saying, okay, I'm getting close to the ICW, all of a sudden, like this is so silly. Like I had this memory of like boating school when it was like the number one thing you do is, or the number one thing you don't want to do is lose control of the throttle. Yeah. And we're thinking, oh no, the throttle. And as I turn and I look at the throttle, and this has never happened to me ever since. This happened one time only. The boat goes from 36 miles an hour in one direction to spinning 90 degrees, like in circles, just really, really quickly. And I remember it was one of those things where I caught myself on the left side of the tower, and I'm holding on all my top body is out of the actual boat. And I remember thinking like, this is one of those moments where it's like make or break. And it was, for a second, it was like I didn't know what to do because I'd never been in that scenario. Obviously, like time passes and you kind of come out of that state of like, oh, okay, I'm like the sobering moment. You could turn the motor down. Yeah. But for those moments, it was like, I really felt like that was it. And everyone knows if you fall in that scenario, that boat doesn't stop.
Right. Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like, oof.
Yeah.
And it made me rethink how much I wanted to do it, you know?
Yeah. I know when I was in Austin, Yeti invited me, Splendid and I, to Austin for the premiere of the Yeti film. Mm-hmm. And I told that story to all the Yeti people. They asked me to tell it to them. And it was, they were pretty intrigued with it, you know, that it's just, and I had a buddy of mine I went to tech with, and he was in zoology, pre-med, but he owns a big crane company in Amarillo, and he's a pilot, man. He's got probably 30,000 hours, but, and he's owned like 40 airplanes in his life. But I told him about it. He said, you know, I almost wish I could be in the same situation just to see if I could live, that I could survive. I said, I don't think you want to be there, Doofus. I call him Doofus. His name is Knut. He's a Norwegian fellow. And Knut Mulhus. And I said, I don't know if you want to do that or not. Well, he got his chance.
He did.
He got his chance in a chopper. He was flying not a Bell Jet Ranger, but another one, one of the big ones, and lost tail rotor. And we're loaded with people, with 4 guys in there looking at a construction site. But he got it down safely, but one of the skids collapsed and the propellers went into the ground and ruined the chopper.
Still.
Yeah.
At least he got his vindication. He knew he could do it.
He got to try it.
One of the questions that I had was, you mentioned in that story how you had to fall back 90. Did I get that correct? You had to fall back 90 to keep speed?
Yeah, I had to, when I was banking,
Bank 90, yes,
over, the more you bank, the more speed you need.
What are you pivoting on? You're pivoting towards nose down at this point?
You nose down and you bank the wing over like this. And so the more you bank it this way, the more your nose needs to be descending to increase your airspeed, because your inside wing, say when you're turning to the right, for instance, and that's what I was doing. I was banking to the right. The more, the steeper your bank, the more your airspeed, because your inside wing loses airspeed. And whenever it stalls, your inside wing, it's like being on a merry-go-round. If you're right in the center of a merry-go-round, and it's going like hell in a circle, who's getting dizzier? The guys on the outside or the guy on the inside?
The guys on the inside.
No, the guy on the outside.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, yes.
And so your outside wing is got lift. Your inside wing is losing lift. And so if I knew from my instructor, who was a B-24 pilot in World War II, I mean, he told me, he said, airspeed, watch that. If you bank it, you get that airspeed up. Airspeed and altitude is life. And I could hear his voice. He's like, get that nose down, man. You're banking it over. Get that nose down and keep that airspeed up, or you're going to stall. And if you stall here, you're dead.
Yeah.
And that ground was coming up real fast.
I can imagine.
All I could hear was the wind whistling.
It's funny. I feel so safe traveling on planes, and now I'm just not feeling the same.
Well, I had a incident several months ago in the plane I showed you.
Really?
Yeah, I was going out east of Benjamin here on my son's place. He's got 6 or 7,000 acres out there leased, and I was looking at the fence. The fence river had gotten up and was knocked some of the fence down. And just as I banked, I was over 82, and I was about 400 feet AGL, and just as I banked to the left to leave and go over rough country, where landing was going to be at 0, the engine just lost power. It just, and my RPM dropped. And I went, what? Not this again. And so I banked back toward the highway, checked. I couldn't get any more RPM. It got down below to where the plane would actually fly. I just kept losing altitude very slowly. I could keep flying, but I was losing altitude.
You're gliding, yeah. Okay.
And so I thought I lied on 82. Well, it was Friday, and that college traffic and trucks were solid, and I knew I couldn't pull it off. If I can just make it to 267, where you came in from Rhineland Monday, just as I banked right there, as far as I could see was road construction. They had orange cones in the middle of the highway. I went, Jesus, what else do I need here against me? And so I just kept flying south, and finally I could see the end of the cones and a flagger down there. And so I still had enough altitude, and so I just kind of made a 360 out in the wheat field, and then I came back, and I just came in right over that flagger's head and landed on the highway. Was he saying
anything like, no, stop?
Oh, he just kind of looked up at me like that. And so I had to taxi that airplane for 13 miles on the highway. I had police escort and everything.
And that wasn't the time that you parked it over to get gas?
No, that was in the early 80s. Yeah.
Talk about that one?
Yeah, I was looking for some cattle for a ranch out here, and I was getting low on fuel. Instead of fly back to Knox City, I figured, well, I'll just land in Benjamin and pull up the filling station and fill up. And it was a 1946 Champ, which would use regular gasoline. And so I just landed on Highway 6 and pulled up to the red light. And I remember the school bus driver was on the opposite side, and he looked at me and just shook his head and turned and headed to school. And I just whipped in and nosed up to the gas pump. And the owner had come out, and he was nearly choking on his chewing tobacco. He said, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "I need gas." He said, "Well, fill her up." And so I filled it up and then pushed it back between the station and a cafe there, and then cooled it, let it cool down, then cranked it up and pulled it back on 82 and took off. And then what's so unique about it is that I'm the only other person to have done that. The only other person to park a plane there was in World War II, when a P-38 Lightning had engine trouble and landed on 82 west of Benjamin and taxied into Benjamin and parked at that same spot. And an old World War I veteran guarded that plane all night long with a shotgun. And the next day, the Army came and dismantled that plane, took it apart, put it on a truck, and carried it away.
That is an amazing story. It's more so because I feel like there's a romanticization between this, like you and the city that you essentially grown up in. So you're part of the history as well. Do you feel like that?
Yeah.
It's almost like like someone who has been so into the history of what was, but like you've done so many things for, at least I think, yourself and your family, through which you have now, I think, had enough stories to say, hey, like, Wyman is part of Benjamin. Benjamin is part of Wyman.
I'd like to think that. I'd like to think that, because, I mean, how many, and I don't want to say, I'll just say published photographers come from a town of 200.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just put it that way. I mean, I could go through, accolades, till the sun goes down, but I'm not going to do
We're
it.
not here to do accolades.
Yeah,
We're here to talk about
it's
you.
no big deal. I'd like to mention one that I'm really proud of.
Please do.
In 2018, I was named one of America's Outdoor Legends by Field and Stream magazine.
Have you been nominated for the Hall of Fame yet?
No.
I'm pretty sure anyone who's listening to this can nominate you for the Hall of Fame. And it's more so just a tedious process of trying to find all your work and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that you're definitely a candidate for said Hall of Fame within TPWD. Or I think it's a national guild, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. Shannon Tompkins had more of the information on it. I'll ask him, though. I know Robert Sawyer, who did the book. He's a big waterfowl guy, but he did a history book essentially on the one little like hotel area, one club called the Texas Tarpon Club, and it was in Port O'Connor, I believe. And he talked a lot about that and like how back then it was more so like you were a sportsman if you could catch a tarpon on a New England bass rod, if you could kill X amount of 100 of ducks in one day, if you could kill all these other things. And it was like, wow, like there was so much that I didn't know. Like it was just genuinely impressive to see all that stuff from, again, someone who, instead of trying to just like, talk about themselves, was like, there's so much more. There's a big wealth of information where people aren't even willing to look for it. One of the jokes that Robert would make is like, it took someone from out of Texas to write a book about Texas.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to kind of touch over was you and the fact that you're also a woodworker in terms of you make your own calls.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to talk about how you got into that, what started that, et cetera.
Well, the first call I ever had was my, as I'd mentioned earlier, I was 14 years old, and my, girlfriend, when you're
heavy
14,
parentheses, yeah.
Yeah, just girl buddy. Her daddy was a coyote caller. He lived out on a ranch out here, and he made his own calls out of Bodark wood. And I asked her if she could swipe one of her daddy's calls and give it to me. So she brought it to me in class one day, and I used that thing, and then I thought, well, shoot, I'm gonna start making my own calls, and I've made a lot of calls.
I mean, I can imagine. What were some of the things that you learned through making calls, in terms of I don't know, like just maybe like lessons or techniques or strategies as to like how you.
Well, it's all. I don't have a lathe or anything. It's all by hand.
I figure
by file. Of course, electric drill. And I hold it in my hand, drill the holes in them, and a belt sander, and I have to eyeball everything. There's nothing that's consistent. Every call is different. Every one of them. I cannot make. I've probably made 4 calls in my life that sound the same. They all sound a little bit different. I just can't. I can't make the same sound.
Are you proud of each one's having its own uniqueness?
Yeah, but they have to. I'm not a band person. I played a trumpet in high school.
Does it be the same tone or tonality? Or...
Yeah, it's got to have a tone to it. It's got to be pretty easy to blow, and it's at the top end. Whenever you're really putting the pressure to it, it can't cut out. So there's things about it that it's got to have some aspects. And if it doesn't have it, I just throw them away.
That's interesting.
Some of them I'll make, and then they sound good. I think they sound good, but they never sound exactly like whenever you're actually out calling.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, in my shop, I'll blow on the call and I go, God, this is great. This is great. But when I sit down to call, it doesn't sound right.
You think it's like a bias?
It's number one, the acoustics in the room, and number two, you exhale differently whenever you're calling. In that room, you just kind of blow on it. But whenever you're calling, it's like a musical instrument. It really is. It's a musical instrument. It's an open reed musical instrument. And it's like a saxophone or a clarinet. And so you just, whenever you're out there seriously doing it, temperature makes a difference. If it's cold, if they start cutting out on you when it's cold, I go back to the shop with them. I don't want them cutting out on me.
Huh.
They'll sound great in warm weather, and they'll cut out on you in cold weather. I won't use them.
Huh. That's interesting. That is really interesting. I wonder if that has to do, like we mentioned, temperature or pressure, or just maybe like a heightened sense of state. You know, when you're out there hunting, your parasympathetic nervous system is activated.
I
You're
think that's
not
some of it.
more like
I
relaxed
think
and
that's
stuff
some
like
of it.
that.
Yeah, I
Huh.
think that's some of it. But it's the curvature of the mouthpiece. It is the thickness of your reed. It is the depth of the trench that's in the mouthpiece. It's how big the bell is on the call. Everything makes a difference in the tone, the voice.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the process in terms of that part of being such an artisanal craftsman?
You're making the calls?
Mm-hmm.
When it works. You know, first you take it from just a piece of wood,
Mm-hmm.
mesquite stump.
Mm.
So you take a chainsaw and you slice a mesquite stump into little pieces about 1.5 inches wide, 6 inches long. And then you take a sander and you hold it in your hands and you sit there and you start sanding it into a perfect tube
Mm-hmm.
without a hole in it. And so that's how it starts. And I'll look at the gnarls in the wood. If it's pretty wood, I already like it.
Mm.
If it's just plain wood, like, you know, just has no character to it, it's not that big a deal. I'll chunk it on the side. But if it's got a lot of gnarls in it, I like it. And so, and then you start forming it and how you want the end of it. And then you take a bandsaw and you cut down and you make the mouthpiece. And then, of course, in order to make the curvature of it, like on a saxophone, you got a a table, a band sander, and you just stand there and you just, with your eye, and you sit there and you just move it back and forth, and forth. And you know right off the bat if you screwed up or not. Because that curvature has to be consistent. It can't be like flat and then start off. It's got to be consistently starting to fall away. And then you have to cut a spot for the little piece of rubber that holds the reed in. And then you make your trench, and you can run it in a millisecond because you're using a Dremel tool.
Mm-hmm.
And you hold it in your hand. You've got the little tool on the end of it's just a little knob, and you make a pencil mark, and you drill, and you sit there and you just make that little trench to connect with the mouth. I mean the end of the. So you've made your big hole in the end with a big drill. So you're trying to intercept it with the Dremel tool.
Gotcha.
And then if you hadn't screwed it up, because if you ever let it slip, you cut a trench sideways and it's blown.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you've accomplished that trench, then you make it deep as you think it needs to be, and then you take a sandpaper and you sand off the mouthpiece. Then you look at it and you say, okay, I think it's ready. And so then you search through all your plastic reed and get the thickness that you think you need, and you cut your reed with a scissors, and then when you put it in there and you put it up to your mouth, and here you go.
Mm-hmm.
And in that first blow, you know if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
It's just like, and if it doesn't make a sound, you go, I screwed up.
Don't know where, don't know how, but I did.
I screwed up. And then it's back to the bench with it.
Uh-huh.
And then you start working on it again. And then all of a sudden you go, and it makes a sound. You go, okay, I'm getting there.
Uh-huh. Wow. One of the things I wanted to talk about, now that we've spent so much time not talking about coyotes, but now on the topic of said coyotes, was there ever any like political battle that you had to be a part of for coyotes? You know, like a better way to explain it would be, for example, we just had the trout regulations, and that was a big deal. I was a huge proponent for the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
You have people like Chuck Nizer and I and other guys as well who are huge proponents for, you know, trying to keep our oysters to ourselves, and people who, you know, fight for most and stuff like that. But was there ever anything that you found yourself on the passionate side of in terms of protection?
Oh yeah. I mean, just because I have hunted coyotes so diligently for so long, although now not near like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather photograph them. I have a great compassion for coyotes. I have a great respect for them. And I don't like to see people abusing them. You know, I don't like calling contests because all that is killing contests. People will feed up coyotes and get them used to their presence, and then they'll go out and they'll kill them all. They'll see somebody drive up in a pickup and they'll think, well, they're here to put out some cattle cake, and then they stick a rifle out and blow them away. I don't like that at all. And that's what you get into with these hunting contests. I don't like any kind of hunting contest. I hunt for the sport of hunting. It's between me and the animal. It's not trying to set some kind of a record. It's not trying to beat somebody at something. It's between me and the animal. If he gets away, I screwed up. If I get him, you know, I respect him in death, he or she in death, and I take my notes. I don't throw them away and hang them up on a fence post and brag about it. I take my notes, weigh them, age them, look for parasites, look for any kind of a injury on them. I write all this information down, write the rifle down I shot them with, the distance, how long it took them to come in, the cloud cover, the temperature, and then I take them to a spot where I think they would be laying in those weather conditions. If it's a warm day, I'll put them in the shade and I'll lay them down like they're asleep. And then I'll walk away.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. It's always something that I think needs to be heard, especially from someone who has also been on the other side of the aisle, where, you know, you were trapping to survive and stuff. And, you know, you see it a lot in the fishing side. And I know this isn't a fishing heavy episode, but like some of the guides who, you know, were doing those giant trout kills and stuff like that, and then gravitated towards the tarpon kills after the freezes, like, it is a shame that it happened, but some of those guys now are some of the biggest proponents as to why we shouldn't treat the fishery the way we have been. And I think now, so more than ever, we're seeing the trout population bounce back to where Texas is, in my opinion, truly retaking its stake as the greatest speckled trout fishery on the planet. But then again, I also could just be blowing hot air. That's just my own perception of it. But I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot, and we're at the hour 40. I always ask two questions to end it. I'm not ready to end it just yet. I would like to ask, maybe on a more like funny-ish side of this conversation, what is something about Wyman Meinzer that most people don't know?
I don't know.
Well,
I'm pretty open. I'm pretty open, but I'm a kidding guy. I love to kid people. Probably some of them too much. I've got my favorite guys that I kid all to hell. They dread to see me coming. Probably most people don't know that I do have a temper.
Yeah,
I do have a temper.
I mean, you talked about you grew up with people who, like, you were nice, you used to kid around and stuff, but you messed with the wrong person at the wrong time. You're gonna bite back. I get it.
And you know, and raising around those people, I guess I'm sort of that way. I appreciate people. I do not like people who are arrogant. I do not like arrogance at all. I will not give them an ounce of time, not a moment of time.
Interesting.
Unless they just force themselves on me, and then I'll play like I'm listening. But I do not like arrogance in people.
Do you see arrogance more now than you did back then?
I don't know. There was arrogance back then. I don't know. I don't know if I can really answer that correctly or not.
So maybe the better way to put it would be the arrogance was always there.
I don't braggadocio. I don't like to hear people bragging a lot.
Gotcha.
And you see that a lot today.
Yeah.
I don't watch hunting shows. I think they're bullshit. Most of them, hunting shows. Stupid things like guys dancing around a dead animal. I think that's the most absurd thing.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that. I don't watch it. I've never seen it. But they'll kill an animal, then they'll do a little war dance. I think that's so stupid. Absolutely stupid. Yeah. Treat them with, they're an animal. Yeah. They've been killed. Yes. but they deserve respect.
This might be a counterintuitive question, but was there ever a moment where you felt like you didn't give a certain animal enough respect? Where maybe you took it for granted?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Way back years ago as a young man. Yeah.
When do you think you kind of? We mentioned it. We mentioned that it was the moment where you saw that I think it was that coyote fight for its life. That you were you kind of like, oh, okay, different.
If you can imagine this, when I was hunting for a living, I shot a coyote one day and I sat down and bawled.
Really?
I sat down on a pickup and cried my eyes out.
Why this one? Why this specific encounter?
It was a younger animal, and he was just fighting like heck to get away. He wasn't going to bite, but I needed the money. I needed that $15 for that hide. And I shot him, and I remember the look in his eyes, and I walked over to the pickup and sat down and cried my eyes out. It was almost a look of, why did you do that?
That's interesting. You know, it's funny. The people that I've met who've spent a lot of time over a very small or very niche part of their industry tend to have stories like this. And I often wonder why. I wonder, why is it that you can just perceive that there's a border or a line of communication between you and that animal in that moment? Because for all intents of logic reasoning, there is none, right?
Right.
But you felt it. And for example, I had a story with Bud Rowland, who he holds the world record for the biggest speckled trout ever caught, ever. 15 pounds, 6 ounces at least. And he talks about a fish that he kind of let go that was 36 or 34. And he talks about how when he let that fish go and that fish kind of stayed there by him while he was waiting for a couple of minutes, it almost felt like that fish was saying, like, and it's his words, not mine, but it was saying like, hey, bud, thanks for letting me go. And it swam off. And it was one of those things. And, you know, you talk to guys like Jay Watkins, and, you know, you could tell he is extremely passionate about these fish, despite also having been one of the people who had killed a bunch. And so it's, again, going back to what I said a while ago, it's almost like a very beautiful thing to see how people who, again, not that these animals are taken for granted at any point, but were presented with that kind of mindset, have gravitated towards, you know, treating these animals with respect through a moment of personification of an animal. Almost like you're seeing them as people, if that makes any sense. Yeah. I didn't mean to be too verbose, but...
No, you know, I was thinking the other day, I was driving along, back in the day, years ago, you know, if I was driving down the road and I saw a coyote, say on a ranch or something, I'd stop and I'd shoot it. Now, when I drive down the road and I see one, I just salute him and say, I'll meet you on even terms one day.
I like that.
May you be the better man.
I like that.
It might be you and it might be me.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself in a dangerous situation around coyotes?
No.
Or around any wildlife? Better question.
Yeah. Around rattlesnake. I was photographing a Mojave one time. Mojave's most venomous rattlesnake in America. They have neurotoxin. They kill more horses in West Texas. I mean, I've had ranchers tell me he said, I lose horses to these rattlesnakes. He said, you better watch them.
By the tens, by singles, or by hundred? How many horses are we talking a year?
You know, a couple a year.
Okay, like 5. Okay.
Yeah. But they're very venomous rattlesnakes, and it's a neurotoxin. It's not like a diamondback, which is a hemotoxin where
your blood coagulates.
Your blood coagulates and your meat is eaten away. You just start, you know, getting shakes. And so I was photographing a Mojave, and it was a chilly day. And I wanted, and one of the ways that you can determine the difference between a Western diamondback and a Mojave is the pattern of scales between their eyes, because they're pretty similar otherwise. And so this rattler was coiled up, and I thought, well, it's too cool for him to strike. So I had a macro lens, and I was standing over him. It was on like a mound ground. It was like a hogback, they call them.
Uh-huh.
And say, for instance, it was like you're sitting on that little couch there, and you had
Yes.
legs on both sides. Well, that rattler was between me, and I was down on him photographing those
Yes.
and he struck right straight up at me, and I jumped and fell on top of him, and he fell on his back. That snake fell on his back, and as it was trying to right itself to get another shot at me, I was trying like hell to get off of him.
Uh-huh.
And that shook me up. I'm not scared of rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes don't scare me. That day I was shook up. I was really shook up. But rattlesnakes don't bother me at all. I mean, if I can, I'm not going to go walk up to one and go, hey,
grab
buddy,
my tail or whatever. Yeah.
I respect them. I don't kill them if I see them. If I've even stopped on the highway and got them off the highway before somebody could run over them. But you, by God, better well respect them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only other animal in the Texas brush, that, if you will, that I have like this, like it's almost like a dream animal to shoot, is a rattlesnake.
Really?
Yeah, I told you this like a couple minutes ago. Wait a minute, it's like almost 2 hours ago.
You want to shoot a rattlesnake?
No, not shoot. Like
photograph.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah.
I photographed so many rattlesnakes. My word! I photographed one time. I named him. He was a mean son of a gun. I named him Bluto.
Bluto.
That's kind of a bullish name. Bluto. That son of a gun would eat you up. He was big,
He's aggressive.
heavy, aggressive. He would strike. I would lay on my stomach in front of him to photograph him, and he would strike, and instead of pulling back, he'd pull himself to you and strike again.
Really?
And I just have to back up, just backing up on my elbows. He was huge. I sold that picture to National Geographic, and they bought it for 2 years straight for their TV show.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if I've seen it plenty of times then.
You may have. I've photoed some. I have put rattlesnake on cover of Outdoor Life and Field and Stream. I know, but I don't think he was the one.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, for some reason, it's just like it's the Texas thing that kind of gets me, as I want to take a picture of a Texas, diamondback rattlesnake. Yeah. Like I did the longhorn, and that was awesome.
They're just now coming out of their dens. They're just now. However, we have rain coming this weekend, and rattlesnakes know when there's weather change, and they may wait a few days before they come out.
Interesting. You mentioned off air, right, that one of the things you got into before all of this was turkey shooting. So you've done a little bit of turkey, you've done a little bit of coyotes, or a lot of bit of coyotes, and all these other fauna. Is there any other fauna that you were similarly kind of passionate towards? Maybe like bobcats, mountain lions, etc.
Oh, yeah, bobcats for sure. White-tailed deer. I used to photograph white-tailed deer a lot. I quit doing that. Okay. I did a book on the East Foundation. Dr. Neil Wilkins asked me to come down and do a book. Actually, I've been shooting for that foundation since 2013, and then about 2016-ish, he mentioned we ought to do a book, and so we finished that project up. And what was my point there? I was talking about rattlesnakes.
You're talking about white-tailed deer for a split second. Something about a book. Someone asked you about a book.
Yeah. Oh man, what was that? I forgot. When you're 74, you'll get that way.
I mean, I think you're one of the sharpest people I've met for anywhere above 60 or 58. So,
anyway, golly, something about these foundations. Oh. Yeah, I shot on that place. They actually commissioned me to shoot every month except for July and August, because those were months of hell in South Texas. Uh-huh. And I shot down there until about 2020 or so, and that was an incredible experience. That place had not been ever photographed. It was almost stepping back into a time bubble. It was like the 1950s. and 150,000 acres. And I mean, I went all over there photographing everything from insects to white-tailed deer. And I loved photographing white-tailed deer on that place because they had not been hunted, they had not been fed up. Nearly all the white-tailed big deer pictures you see today, they're fed up deer.
Mm-hmm.
They've been fed high-protein feed. That place was just raw white-tailed deer that had been raised from the earth. And I mean, I photographed triple drop tine bucks, double drop tine bucks. I photographed big deer fighting. It was amazing. But I was the first guy to ever actually go on the East Foundation. But before, it was owned by Robert East, an old time rancher. A man I would have loved to have known, and he would not allow anybody on that place. I mean, it was like a land that was unknown to anybody but Robert East and his family.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever I was hired to go down and photograph all aspects of that place, thousands upon thousands of photographs for 10 months out of the year, I'd go down for like 3 to 5 days every month and photograph everything, and it was fantastic. It was one of the greatest opportunities.
Wow.
Greatest places.
In contrast to something like that, is there funny, like you mentioned you wish you would have met Mr. East. Is there anyone else who you think that has been lost to time that you personally would have loved to have met from people from history, stuff that you've learned?
Well, I would have loved to have been able to talk to a buffalo hunter.
Yeah. I
got to talk to one son one time in a rest home. He was 90-something years old.
Jesus.
And I see, Miles McCombs was his name. Miles McCombs. And his father was Joe McCombs, who killed several thousand buffalo in the winter of 1877 near Big Springs, Texas. And I asked Miles McCombs, and he had a pretty good memory. He was bedridden. And I said, Mr. McCombs, did your father ever tell you any stories about his younger days of buffalo hunting? And he told me a few things I'd already read, but he said, Papa, those old men always call their fathers Papa. He said, Papa didn't like Fort Griffin.
Fort Griffin.
He said Fort Griffin was hell on earth.
As in?
Because of the bars and the bordellos,
Oh.
prostitutes, the killings. There was a killing there every day for like a month, a hanging. There was a tree down there. You'd find men hung down in the pecan trees on the the Brazos, the middle fork of the Brazos, or the clear fork of the Brazos, with a note on their chest that said, whoever takes this body down will take his place.
Really? And it was just because it was a lawless place. That's why he hated it.
It was lawless. There was law there, but not much.
Not much.
Yeah.
Huh.
There was the old whore, prostitute, Big Nose Kate. I think she hung out a lot with maybe Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday spent a lot of time there.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Oh, yeah. Who was the guy who killed Billy the Kid. He spent time there. He actually was a buffalo hunter for a little while. Oh, my goodness, what's his name? But he killed Billy the Kid. Shoot, fire. I go, was that memory again. Who else? There was several pretty sporty figures pass through the streets. And now then you can go to Fort Griffin and there's a state park. Or it's not a state park anymore. It's like it belongs to some conservancy, historical conservancy. But the city itself, which was called the Flats, was down below the hill. The fort was on top. And then below, down in the flat, the floodplain of the river was the town, and they called it the Flats.
Huh.
That was the hellhole.
Really? That's so
where
interesting.
The killings took place. And in 1879, and see, there were the Tonkawa Indians had a village just to the south across the main highway that goes to Throckmorton to Seymour. And the Tonkawa Indians had a little village over there, and they were guides for the military because they didn't like the Comanches, so they would guide them to chase the Comanches.
Interesting.
And one day they noticed in 1879 that all the guys in the flats, they noticed the Tonkawas were moving everything up on the hill, the top of the hill. They said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Heap big water coming." And that nobody knew except the Indians. Apparently there was one rode in because when you have a big rain, that's one of the things that fascinates me, and I photographed 2 or 3 of them, is the head rise coming down, where you've got dry land and you've got water coming.
Yeah.
Well, they must have gotten a 10 or 12 inch rain up around, Snyder, somewhere up in there. And that's where the headwaters of this river is. And you can run faster than that water travels. Oh, you can trot. You can walk.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've done it. I've gotten to Brazos River before, and there'd be dry, totally dry, and you'll see the water coming. And you can just walk along and get in front of it and sit down, take a picture, and then jump up and walk and get in front of it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so apparently they had a scout that came in and said, "Move up your camp up to high ground." Well, the guys in the flats didn't know it, and it washed the flats away.
Really?
There were people dangling up in the pecan trees. It wiped that town out.
Damn, there's something oddly biblical about that. Like a settlement that was trying to take away from like real nature getting washed away.
Yeah, really.
It's oddly, but it makes sense. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Especially, someone who, I guess, like his dad, who was very, I guess, okay. I'm assuming he was okay with being very solitary and stuff like that. You'd think that having a settlement of any sorts would be better than being alone. But if it was that bad to where he was like, "Man, I'll just do my own thing." I hate that. That's
somewhere I read, it was either in a book on Fort Griffin about that flood. And there's a couple of prostitutes up in a pecan tree, and one of them had a baby, and she dropped it.
No kidding.
In the river, and that woman said, "You dropped your baby." And she said, "Oh, I can get another one of those." That's cold, buddy.
That is very cold.
That's real cold.
Wow.
That's beyond chilly.
I think that's a really good way to end the basis of it. And I'll start my last 2 questions because I feel like we've covered a lot, Wyman. And I knew we were going to cover a lot. So I'm glad that I made this happen because it was a 50-50 chance. And I'm glad I took it. 10 hours on the road.
You're welcome to stay here tonight.
No, it's okay. I have to be back anyway, so there'll be some friends for dinner.
Oh my God.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. I do this not all the time, but like I'm getting used to it. Like, man, I've done one. I did one day. I did 3 of these, 3 podcasts in one day.
Oh my word.
Yeah. I left San Antonio at like 5:15 in the morning, and I got to Rockport like 3 hours later or 2 hours later. Did 3 episodes, each about an hour and a half long. And by the end of it, I was with Seth Gamble, and he was like, "Dude, you've been doing how many?" And I was like, 3. He's like, "Go home."
Wow. That drive to Austin is a killer for me.
It's just going straight.
Jeez.
But with that being said, the last 2 questions I would like to ask is just always the same ones. And the first one is, looking back on the life that you've lived, and one that has a lot of content and a lot of things to dissect, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently, or anything that you wish you would have done at a different time? One can say regrets, but I think regrets is maintains too much of a negative connotation.
Yeah. I've done really, I can say probably, in all honesty, I don't know of anything that I wish I would have done. I've done a lot of things.
Clearly.
I don't want to say accomplished. I'll just say I've done a lot of things.
Succeeded in, but sure.
And I'm happy. I'm content with myself.
Gotcha.
I'm not a perfect person. I've got my quirks, and
I get that.
Kind of wish I didn't have, but that's just that. It's just human.
No, but what I was getting at is, for example, you mentioned that like because of college, you missed out on a lot of good hunting and little things like that. Like a lot of people that I meet tend to always go back to the idea that no matter in the moment how much it seems that like you might get tired of it or waterlogged to the outdoors, in hindsight, it's always I should have done it more.
I'll tell you what. No, I've done everything as much as I want to do.
It's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last question is, and you can be as verbose as you want on this one. In how do you put this? As if you're talking to the younger generation, like kids that are 14, 16, 18, they're looking to get into the space of just the outdoor industry. It doesn't have to be fishing, doesn't have to be hunting or trapping or whatever you want to. What is a piece of advice that you'd give them going into that reality, into that future?
Just get involved in some aspect of it, and learn and get in it enough to where you're going to learn something, not just skip along like skipping a rock across the water, go on one fishing trip or one little hunting trip and that's it and say, I've done it. Really get into something to where you learn in depth what it's all about. See if it's in your soul or not.
I like that. Soul search.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, Wyman, I'm not going to lie to you. This has been really fun. I think that I was caught off guard by me walking up and you being like, all right, I'm hungry. Let's go get a sandwich. But I'm glad we did. I feel like we got to talk a lot more and kind of I could read a lot more of who you were and how I wanted to conduct this podcast. And genuinely, like, I'm super grateful that you were willing to open your doors to me and be a part of this project. I mean, like, this, at the end of the day, this has been a project that I never thought would get this far. Like, I didn't ever see myself doing this.
I'm proud for you.
Thank you. And so to have someone of your notoriety and your expertise and just stuff like that to at least see value in it, to give me the time of day, it means a lot, Wyman.
Oh, sure. I love to share as much as I can. I mean, it's only right. I've lived a good, rich life, and it's only right that I share some of those great moments with people.
All right. Well, we are at 2 hours, 5 minutes, 16 seconds. Probably be like 1 hour, 59 minutes after I cut the beginning and like that break in the middle out. But I mean, with that being said, I mean, we've hit everything, and all we have to do left is get on out of here.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.